The letter came on a Tuesday morning, tucked neatly inside a crisp white envelope stamped with the HOA's logo, 3 little trees and a blue line underneath that was supposed to look friendly and official. I almost didn't open it right away, thinking it was just another newsletter or reminder about trimming hedges or some nonsense about approved mailbox colors. But when I finally did, I had to read the first paragraph twice just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Notice of violation and assessment of fines, total due $70,000. $70,000. My first reaction was laughter, sharp, disbelieving laughter that echoed through my kitchen. I set the letter on the table, took a deep breath, and read through the rest. According to them, I had violated multiple community standards, including unapproved structural modifications, failure to maintain visual harmony, and obstruction of shared access. The last one almost made me choke on my coffee. Shared access, they had no idea what was coming. For years, I'd kept to myself, living peacefully at the edge of the subdivision where my land met the woods. My home was built before the HOA even existed, a quiet cabin that had been in my family for decades. When the developers came in and built their neat little rows of identical houses, they negotiated an easement, a legal right to use the road that crossed my property to reach their new neighborhood. My grandfather had signed the agreement, allowing limited access for residents as long as they maintained the road and didn't interfere with our land. But over time, the HOA grew bold. They paved the road, installed fancy streetlights, and started acting like it belonged to them. I'd let it slide for years, not wanting to stir up trouble. But that letter changed everything. I called the HOA office immediately, and after being transferred twice, I finally got through to their president, a woman named Cynthia who spoke like she'd memorized a legal dictionary but didn't actually understand it. "Mr. Harlan," she said curtly, "these fines are the result of repeated violations and non-compliance with community regulations." I asked her which community she was referring to because my house wasn't part of theirs. There was a pause. Then, in that smug tone HOAs seemed to breed, she said, "All properties within the association boundaries must adhere to our standards." I smiled to myself because I knew what she didn't. My property wasn't within their boundaries, it was older than their entire development. "You might want to double-check your plat maps," I told her calmly. "I think you'll find your community ends about 20 feet before my driveway starts." She brushed me off, claiming their legal team had already verified everything. That was her first mistake. Over the next few days, I started digging through old files, pulling out every document my grandfather had saved: the original deed, the road easement, and the land surveys from when the developers first came knocking 30 years ago. Sure enough, the HOA's road, the only road that led into the subdivision, cut straight through land owned by me. I even confirmed it with the county assessor's office. The HOA had been maintaining and claiming that road for years, paying taxes under the assumption it was community property. But legally, it was mine. The easement only granted them the right to use it, not to control it, and certainly not to fine me for anything on my side of the fence. I decided to pay Cynthia another visit, this time in person. I walked into the HOA office one afternoon, carrying a folder thick with paperwork. The look on her face when she saw me was priceless, the forced smile of someone who thought they held all the cards. "Mr. Harlan," she said, "have you come to settle your fines?" I dropped the folder on the desk with a solid thud. "No," I said. "I've come to show you that you've made a very expensive mistake." I laid out the documents one by one: deed, easement, county map, watching her eyes dart across each page. "This road," I said, tapping the survey, "is my property. Every inch of it." You've been trespassing, maintaining, and enforcing fake rules on land you don't own. So before you send me another bill, maybe get your facts straight." She tried to argue, of course, saying the HOA had been in control of that road for decades. But control doesn't equal ownership, and she knew it. Later that evening, I got a call from one of the HOA board members, a younger guy named Eric who actually sounded reasonable. He said, "Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The board didn't know about the easement details." I told him I understood, but the fines weren't going away until they formally retracted them and issued a public apology. He sighed, saying it would be complicated, but I could hear the nervousness in his voice. They built their entire neighborhood on an assumption, and now that assumption was about to cost them. I told him politely that I expected a resolution within a week, or I'd be forced to take action that would make those 70,000 fines look like pocket change. Over the next few days, things got tense. I saw HOA members driving slowly past my property, taking pictures, whispering among themselves. A notice even went up on the community board claiming I was spreading false information. That made me laugh out loud. They were trying to save face, but I wasn't bluffing. I'd already met with a property lawyer, and he confirmed everything I suspected. If the HOA wanted to keep using that road, they had to follow the original easement agreement, which meant maintaining it, respecting the boundaries, and staying the hell out of my affairs. Any violation could void the easement entirely, cutting off their only access point. Then came the real kicker. A week later, I received another letter from the HOA, this one marked final warning. They demanded immediate payment of the 70,000 fines or they pursue legal remedies. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the envelope. That was the moment I decided enough was enough. I drove down to the county office again, spoke with the zoning commissioner, and had a simple but effective sign approved for installation, private road, access by easement only. I had 2 of them made and posted them right at the start of the road. The reaction was immediate. Cars slowed down, people gawked, and within hours, my phone started ringing off the hook. Cynthia herself called, furious, demanding I take the signs down. I told her calmly, "I'm just marking my property, like any good neighbor should." That night, as I sat on my porch watching the last bit of sunlight fade over the trees, I thought about how far they pushed me. I lived here peacefully for decades, never bothering anyone, never asking for trouble. But people like that, people who think power gives them ownership, don't understand restraint until someone puts them in their place. The fines they slapped on me were laughable, but the lesson they were about to learn would cost them far more than money. Because once I decided to act, there would be no misunderstanding left. They could fine me all they wanted, but they were about to learn the hard way that you don't mess with the man who owns the only road in. The morning I decided to lock the gate started like any other, quiet, fog rolling low across the road, the kind of calm that made me almost forget about the HOA nonsense for a moment. But then I saw the same group of people who had been giving me trouble for weeks walking right down my driveway like they owned the place, clipboards in hand, pointing at the road, taking pictures and jotting notes. That was it. They ignored my warnings, dismissed my documentation, and laughed off my calls. I'd been patient long enough, but patience has a limit, especially when someone is using your own land to bully you. So I finished my coffee, grabbed my truck keys, and drove down to the gate with a plan that had been sitting in the back of my mind ever since they sent that ridiculous 70,000 fine. The steel gate had been there for years, an old relic from when my grandfather still owned the property. It had been left unlocked for decades, mostly out of goodwill and convenience, but the hinges were strong, the chain heavy, and the lock brand new. I de-installed it the week before, just in case. That morning, I wrapped the chain around the post, slid the lock through, and clicked it shut. The sound was small but satisfying, a single metallic snap that said more than any argument ever could. When I stepped back and looked at it, the bold red private access, authorized use only sign gleamed in the morning light. Within an hour, the first car came rolling up, one of the HOA members in her shiny SUV. She stopped short, confusion flashing across her face. Then she got out, marched up to the gate, and yelled, "What is this?" I told her plainly, "It's my gate, on my road." She started sputtering about community access and HOA bylaws, but I cut her off. "You've been trespassing for years," I said. "Now you can wait until we straighten it out legally." By noon, the entire neighborhood was in an uproar. I watched from my porch as a line of cars formed on the other side of the gate, people standing around, talking in frantic circles, completely unable to comprehend that someone had finally stood up to them. My phone started ringing non-stop. Cynthia, the HOA president, was calling every 10 minutes. When I finally picked up, her voice was sharp with anger. "You can't just block the only access road to the community," she shouted. "You're violating." "I'm not violating anything," I interrupted. "You're the ones who've been in violation. This is my land. Your access is a privilege, not a right. You forgot that, so now you're getting a reminder." There was silence on the line for a few seconds, then the sound of muffled voices in the background. "We'll call the county," she threatened. I chuckled. "Go ahead," I said. "I already did." Within a few hours, a county deputy drove out to check the situation. He was polite, friendly, and clearly familiar with the HOA's reputation. I showed him the deed, the easement agreement, and the property line maps. He flipped through the papers, nodded slowly, and said, "Yeah, looks like this road's yours all right. You're within your rights to restrict access." He even called his supervisor to confirm, and after a short conversation, he handed me back the papers. "As long as emergency services can get through, you're good," he said. "But they're gonna be real unhappy about this." I smiled. "That's kind of the point." The deputy laughed and said, "I'll leave you to it. Good luck." Then he drove off, leaving a crowd of furious HOA members standing behind the locked gate, helpless. That evening, I grilled some steaks, sat out on the porch, and listened to the sound of frustration echoing through the valley. It was incredible how quickly their arrogance melted into panic once they realized I wasn't bluffing. They spent years pushing people around with fines and threats, but now that someone had pushed back, they were paralyzed. A few residents who had nothing to do with the HOA nonsense actually came by later that night, walking the long way through the woods just to thank me. One older man named George told me, "You did what we've all wanted to do for years. They've been running this place like a dictatorship." I told him I wasn't doing it for revenge, just respect. "They forgot where their road begins and ends," I said. "Now they remember." The next morning, Cynthia showed up with 2 board members and a county official, thinking she could intimidate me into unlocking the gate. I met them halfway down the road, documents in hand. The official already looked tired, probably after hearing both sides. He asked for my paperwork, which I gladly handed over. He studied it carefully, then turned to Cynthia. "Ma'am, the property line is clear. This road is privately owned. Your HOA has easement rights, but those can be revoked if conditions are violated, and it looks like they were." Her face went pale. "Revoked?" she repeated. You can't be serious. He shrugged. That's how the law works. You can't enforce HOA authority on land that isn't yours. I watched her try to recover, fumbling for words, but there was nothing she could say. The county official handed her a card and said, "You might want to consult a real estate attorney." Then he turned to me and nodded. "You're good here." After they left, I could practically feel the shift in the neighborhood. The HOA members avoided me, their usual smug smiles replaced by quiet resentment. They still held their meetings, still sent out their newsletters, but they didn't so much as step near that gate again. A few days later, I started getting emails from other homeowners people I'd never met before apologizing for how the board had treated me. One even said he was thinking about running for president to get rid of Cynthia and her cronies. Apparently, my little act of defiance had sparked something. People were realizing the HOA wasn't invincible. That weekend, I unlocked the gate for a few hours to let delivery trucks through, then locked it again. The HOA called another emergency meeting that Sunday, and though I wasn't invited, I heard plenty from neighbors afterward. The board was divided: half wanted to apologize and negotiate, the other half wanted to teach me a lesson. I almost felt sorry for them. They were so used to winning every fight that they didn't know what to do when someone fought smarter. I stayed calm, stayed legal, and never once lost my temper. All I did was hold them accountable using their own favorite weapon: paperwork. As the days passed, things got quieter. The frantic energy that used to buzz through the subdivision vanished. The HOA stopped sending letters, and Cynthia stopped calling. The road stayed locked, except for emergency access and the occasional delivery truck. I could finally walk down the gravel path without seeing cars speeding by or HOA inspectors taking photos of my fence. For the first time in years, I felt like my property was truly mine again. It was peaceful. And in that peace, I realized something important: sometimes, to earn respect from people who think they own you, you have to remind them who really holds the keys. When I looked at that locked gate each morning, I didn't see a barrier, I saw balance restored. They could keep their fines, their rules, and their fake authority. I had something much more valuable: control of the only road they had. And I wasn't planning on giving it back anytime soon. Weeks passed since I locked the gate, and life around the neighborhood had changed in ways none of them could be predicted. The once bustling HOA community now felt eerily quiet, almost like a ghost town. Cars that used to speed down the road stayed parked. The morning joggers who trespassed without a thought were nowhere to be seen. Every sound of hammering, lawn mowing, or chatter had died down. It was as if the entire place was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. And honestly, that silence was the best thing that had ever happened here. But of course, the HOA couldn't let things stay peaceful for long. It wasn't in their nature. I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried something desperate. The call came one Thursday morning while I was fixing the fence along the north edge of the property. It was from a county inspector. He said he'd received a complaint from the HOA claiming I was illegally obstructing a public access road. I almost laughed right there. They were trying the same move that had already failed twice before, hoping persistence would make it true. I told the inspector to come on out, and I'd show him everything myself. When he arrived, he was a younger guy, new to the department by the looks of it, clipboard in hand and trying to act authoritative. He took one look at the locked gate and frowned. "So this is the road in question?" I nodded and handed him the paperwork, the same thick stack I'd shown every official before him. Deed, survey maps, easement agreements, correspondence, everything perfectly in order. He skimmed through it, and I could see his confidence waver as he reached the section with the county's seal. "This shows the road is private property," he said slowly. "So why did they tell me it was a community easement?" I shrugged. "Because they're used to lying their way into getting what they want." He looked around, made a few notes, and said, "Well, this seems pretty clear. You're not in violation of anything. If they file another complaint, just reference this inspection report." I thanked him, shook his hand, and watched as he drove back down the gravel road toward the gate where a few HOA members were waiting. I could see them arguing with him from a distance, their arms flailing, voices rising. But after a few minutes, he waved them off and left. The looks on their faces when he drove away were worth every ounce of frustration they caused me. That same night, they tried another tactic. I caught two people sneaking down the road around midnight, flashlights in hand, whispering like teenagers on a dare. They didn't know I had motion-activated floodlights set up along the fence. The second they crossed the property line, the whole area lit up like a football field. I stepped out onto the porch, shotgun slung loosely across my arm, not threatening, just visible. "Evening," I said calmly. They froze like deer caught in headlights. One of them stammered something about just checking the road. I pointed toward the gate. "Road ends back there. Everything past that belongs to me. You've got about 10 seconds to head back before I call the sheriff." They didn't need a second warning. They scrambled back up the hill so fast one of them dropped their flashlight, which I still keep as a souvenir. The next morning, I made a few phone calls and installed new security cameras facing the gate. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd play prepared. By the following week, the HOA's tone had shifted entirely. The threats had stopped, replaced by polite emails asking if we could discuss a possible compromise. Cynthia even wrote me personally, her tone unrecognizably humble, saying they were willing to review the road maintenance agreement if I'd consider reopening access. I read it twice just to make sure it wasn't some kind of trap. But I didn't respond right away. I wanted them to sweat a little longer. For years, they disrespected property lines, fined innocent homeowners for nonsense like mailbox paint or grass height, and acted like the law didn't apply to them. Now they were finally learning how it felt to be powerless. Still, I wasn't unreasonable. After a few days, I invited Cynthia and the board to meet at the gate on my terms. No shouting, no demands, just a straightforward talk. When they showed up, they looked exhausted, the arrogance drained out of them. Cynthia started by apologizing, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. She admitted they'd made some mistakes and overstepped their boundaries. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. When she was done, I said, "This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. You built your rules on land that isn't yours. You tried to fine me for using my own property. That ends now." She nodded, almost meekly. I told them I'd consider reopening the road for emergency and resident access, but only after they signed a formal agreement acknowledging my ownership and forfeiting any future claim of authority over it. They agreed. We met with the county clerk the next day to make it official. Watching Cynthia sign that document felt like justice in its purest form. The woman who once boasted about controlling the neighborhood was now legally acknowledging she had no control over me, or my land. The clerk notarized everything, made copies, and handed me the original. I put it in a frame when I got home. That night, I unlocked the gate for the first time in weeks. The road was open again, but on my terms. There was a new sign right beside it that read, "Access by permission only, owner maintains full rights." It was simple, clear, and permanent. Life slowly returned to normal after that, though normal had a new definition. The HOA no longer patrolled near my property, the ridiculous fines and letters stopped showing up. I could swim in the lake, host barbecues, and drive down my road without feeling like someone was watching or waiting to pounce. The neighbors who had stayed silent during the worst of it began stopping by to say they were glad I'd stood up to the board. Some even asked for advice on how to challenge their own unfair fines. It became almost a legend around the area how one homeowner took down the HOA using nothing but the truth, patience, and a locked gate. And honestly, it felt good to know I'd helped others see that you don't have to bow down to people who misuse power. A month later, I got a letter in the mail from the new HOA president. Cynthia had resigned, apparently after the board voted her out. The letter thanked me for helping restore balance and respect in the community. They even invited me to a neighborhood event as a valued member. I didn't go, but I appreciated the gesture. Things had come full circle. What started as a battle over control had turned into a lesson everyone could see plainly. Ownership isn't about paperwork or politics, it's about standing firm when others try to take what's yours. Now, when I drive down that road, I smile. The gravel crunches under my tires, the lake glimmers in the distance, and peace has returned. The HOA learned its place, and I learned that sometimes the best way to handle arrogance isn't through anger, it's through patience, preparation, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing you've won without ever needing to shout. The road, the land, the silence, all of it is mine, just like it always should have been.